Yeah, I was like watching at home and I felt uncomfortable. I was like, there's no way they can play in this. And then they played in it for like 25
Oh yeah,
minutes.
how I would have been so mad if I only had that many minutes left and I had to
Yes,
go in the locker room and then come back out.
100%. All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Soccer Wise, NWSL Wednesdays here. David Goss, Jordan Angeli, ready to break it all down and do the thing. Jordan, looking very stylish today if you are watching live, or later if you are listening. You can go to our YouTube page, or you can go to Twitter, or you can go to Twitch to watch us any day, 2 p.m. Eastern time, or go back and watch it later on. It kind of has Detroit Tigers vibes,
Yeah, I've
but it's
thought that since the
BAFC.
beginning. Yeah. And now we have another logo in USL Super League in the Brooklyn team that looks
Yeah.
very eerily similar too. But I've got a Bay FC hat on. They sent us a full box of gear when I was at Golazo, and so this was the hat that I picked. I think I did a pretty good job. I
I
like
think you
this
did a
hat.
good job.
Nice
Yeah.
little rope detail. It's stylish, but also comfy. Not too big of a brim. You know, all the
Yeah.
things I look for in a hat.
I you have a pretty long list.
Yeah, yeah, I wear a lot of hats.
I also wear a lot of hats, and my whole thing with hats is, can I care the least about this? Because I will sweat through it and ruin it and make it disposable. And so I go away from all the things you just said because I don't want to feel nervous about
Right.
wearing it.
You don't want to ruin it.
Exactly. And I almost bought a hat at the US Open last week that looked like that with the rope and all of that. And I was looking
Ooh,
for it and I couldn't find the one I wanted. And I was like, you know what?
maybe this is
It'll
the
be
time.
okay. I
Those are
don't
probably
need
like
this.
$60 though, huh?
100%. I would be actually probably shocked if it was just $60. But shout out to Taylor Fritz and Francis Tiafo for making it to the semifinal. There will be an American male in the US Open final for the first time in 20 years.
Wow.
I am clearly
A lot of
excited
tennis
about
knowledge
that.
there.
Yeah, but we've got a lot of NWSL stuff to be excited about. So we are pumped to get back into the kitchen and cook up something special here. If you haven't listened yet, we did a special episode last Wednesday about the new NWSL CBA, which we'll talk about in a moment. So we had Susie Cirillo on, as well as Tori Hooster for that one, head of the NWSL PA, as well as an employment lawyer to talk about some of the details. We're going to keep covering that for the rest of this year because I think it's a really interesting story. It's a unique one. It's special, and there are so many different angles because it affects so many different people. But it was a huge moment. So if you haven't listened to that episode, you can go back and listen to it. It's in our feed, on our pages, everywhere that you go and look for our show and find it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to our Patreon. You can get our NWSL depth charts. There you can get access to our Discord, to our mailbag, which I didn't do a mailbag episode this week because of Labor Day. So we've got 2 mailbag questions that we've inserted into this show that we will get to. And that's where you can interact with us and hang out and talk about the games and talk about everything that's going on. We are going to talk about what it turns out has been a record-setting transfer window for the NWSL. It has thankfully given me some assurance with the insanity I feel like I had been going through, updating the depth charts and moving players. And this, by the way, what we're going to talk about does not, I think, include trades. And I feel like I've been like, do I not know how to keep up? And it felt really warm and comforting to be like, oh no, a lot has happened over the last 2 months in the NWSL transfer window.
Yeah, no, a lot has happened, and I think now we know with the CBA why a lot of those big trades, big longer term deals happened or were happening before that got announced. And then, of course, now that there is free agency, we're seeing a lot more players signed to a little bit longer deals.
And a lot of players have signed deals just now over the last few days. So it has been really interesting. It's something to keep up with because free agency also is now open. for players who will be free agents. And this obviously is a whole new world that we are delving into and figuring it out. So we're going to talk about that. We've got some questions, as I said, in the mailbag. I am going to offer you some deals, buy or sell if you want to, on a few NWSL teams that are trying to make some late runs. We've got a panic meter to go through in the Midwest. I think everyone can probably figure out what team I'm talking about there. And Ballon d'Or, we have the finalists that have been announced. So we will talk about some of the names on that list coming up. But first, I have to put out there that you have an opportunity to own your own soccer team. This is not a Ponzi scheme. I am not selling you a product from outside of the trunk of my car. Minnesota Aurora, which I think most people know, but if you don't, it's a USLW club that has sold out every single game they've ever played, based in Minneapolis. Now we're getting into danger zones because St. Paul, Minneapolis. So I'm going to say based in the Twin Cities.
There you go. I was going to say, just keep it vague. Keep it vague.
Stay as safe as you can. They are they play their games at the Vikings training facility. I think it's a 5,000 person stadium. As I said, they've sold out every game. Their games are broadcast on local TV. They've been one of the best teams making the playoffs since they've existed. They were community funded to start, and now they've opened up for their second round of funding to help the club continue to grow. I believe they added a reserve team this year, and they're looking to do more and more. I am going to buy into this because I think this is the coolest thing I could spend my money on, and being like, oh, that team? Yeah, I'm rooting for them because that's my team.
Yeah.
Like, what would be better? I mean, you've played pro sports, so you have some vibes on that, but I don't really get that.
No, it's cool. It's a very Green Bay Packers idea, which is interesting from that they're playing at the Minnesota Vikings stadium. But I think this is a really good way to build a team, and it's unique. We've seen it done with Oakland Roots as well, and building a team that way. But I like that they're opening up this again, and I think you said it starts at $100 to be a part of this. So it's pretty. I feel like for a lot of people, it's a place where they could invest and say, hey, for $100, I want to be an owner of the team. And then it just builds a fan base, not only within Minnesota, but like you, Goss, out east as well. You can get owners from wherever rooting for Minnesota Aurora.
Yeah. Everyone in my household has a Minnesota Aurora shirt already. So we're already on the pathway.
Right.
I'm a big fan of the Twin Cities. I always have a great time when I go there. It is the farthest place to get to, but I always have a good time once I
go there in the summer, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Okay.
Were you questioning my ability to have a good time based off that?
Well, I just feel like in the winter, it must be a very different experience.
I like the winter. I like the calm of the winter. I like snow.
Okay, so
as long as it's not,
that's where you're going.
Yeah, as long as it's not brown snow, I'm good.
Yeah.
It's city snow where it's once it falls that's where I cut off. But before that, I like it. And so, yes, all of these games are played in the summer, so that helps. And all the times I have been to Minnesota has been the summer as well, so that also helps. But it's a great city, a great place. You obviously don't have to go to be a part of this. You can just help support this, because I think when you talk about community, we talk about soccer community, and that's much larger than just a physical place or being connected to one spot. It's the reason we do this show. It's the reason all of us, I think, especially online, are finding people to talk to about these things we're passionate about that you can't always find in person all the time. So this is a really cool opportunity. I will continue to push this while it is still open. We might have someone on from the club as well to talk about it, because as you said, where else is an opportunity like this? So this is really cool and something to keep up on. Before we get into the full show, we have a mailbag question here. It is about the NWSL CBA, which, as I said, we did a special episode on last week. I did the 2 interviews. You were not on with me. Do you have anything you want to talk about or has been rattling around in your brain about the CBA before we dig into this mailbag question?
I think I'd just start by saying it was really big for the players, because so much now of the power lies in their hands. So I think congratulations on that. I think there's still a lot of unknowns about how this is actually going to work, especially when you totally eliminate something that United States knows very well, like a draft. Like that's how we have built teams through all different sports for a number of years. And I'm sad about the draft personally. The draft for me was it's one of the best days of my life.
Yeah.
And I am sad that players don't get to experience that, especially now working the last few drafts, how big of a show it was that they put on. So I'm sad. I'm sad about that. And I think it takes away opportunities like for a player like Ali Setnor. I don't think Ali Setnor would have chosen to go to Utah. I don't think she would have if there was free agency, right? But now she goes to Utah as the number one pick, and she is this one of the stars of the rookie class. She is the centerpiece to this Utah team, what they have built themselves around. And that is because Utah chose her. And I think there is a little bit of that. I don't know if it's nostalgia or just willingness to build something different that I wonder if that will start to lose itself without a draft. I wonder if the parity in the league will lose itself
Yeah.
a little bit because talent won't, maybe more people will be prone to go to bigger named clubs. But there's a lot of really good things as well that comes with it. And a lot of talk, Goss. I don't know if anybody's talked about this. There is a lot of talk about doing things on the with that other countries do around the world. International talk, bringing international players in. It just is very feeling like international has a big influence on what's going forward. And it makes me think, is that going to be something that the NWSL implement going forward to bring more of these international stars? Yeah. Do they change their schedule? I don't know. I just think a lot of the writing is on the wall with the wording that they chose because there's a lot of international talk in there.
There is a lot of international talk. Yes, there is. And I said it, I think, on this show when the first rumors reports came out about it, of like being able to deny trades. You're probably just creating an internal transfer market because the odds going forward that both players that both teams want are both going to okay trades is probably pretty low. So I think at a minimum, you're already moving in that direction of like player for player trades are probably a thing of the past for the most part. And it just becomes what we are seeing now, a lot of them, which is like these allocation money trades and whatever it is. And maybe that shifts to just pure straight money. And that becomes what things are like in other places. It also does feel like it has opened up the gap to say international players will want to come here because they can control their own destiny. They won't get traded. They get to choose where they want to live. And yes, I think when we talked with Tori, and she talked at the beginning of the interview about what the NWSLPA does, not just the CBA, it was a lot about helping foreign players find their way in this league and find their feet and understand the nuances of NWSL. That is a lot foreign player facing. Yeah. So it does feel like there are ways to try and help this league sort of fit in to that global pyramid. Now, one of the things we have learned is NWSL, though, is a trendsetter in the space. They are not chasing as much, I think, as some people thought. So the NWSL does have the ability, if they want to, I think, not to shift everyone else's calendar, but to say, like, we exist as a strong entity in this way, and other people do have to adjust around us. I want to ask you this question, though, before we dig in here, because the question is about the trades. You mentioned Ali Sentner and sort of that move. You were a high-level soccer player coming out of college. We've been asked this question a ton. If I'm Ali Sentner and I look at things, am I really going to sign with Gotham? And, like, I understand players have pure confidence in themselves. But am I going to sign with a team and say, yeah, I'll just start over Rose Lavelle and build my way in? Am I going to sign with Portland and start over Jesse Fleming? Like, where do you think the line will be for college players of, like, I want guaranteed playing time versus big markets or higher flashy teams?
I don't know. I think we'll have to learn as it starts to unfold. I don't know when this is going to happen. Like,
next year?
When they're done, the December, like, I don't know when these players can actually sign with other teams and how that will be announced, or if there'll be like a rookies signing day. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like. And I think that's one of the things that when I think about the CBA, there's just a lot of unknowns about the future and what it's going to look like, and just changes. I'm not saying they're good, or I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying there's a lot of changes. So I think there will be some players who recognize I'm not going to play there. So I'm going to go to a place that I can play. But I also think there's going to be players in general, maybe older players too, who realize like, maybe I don't want to live in California and pay half of
Yep.
my salary in taxes. I'd rather
Yep.
live in Houston and not pay state income tax and be able to afford a house. Like those are the realistic things that I think of that are going to be beneficial to some of these players to be able to choose in, not just about the team you're playing for, but the lifestyle you want as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's going to be fascinating. I was asked this question right out the gate, and I was like, it's all going to be about the recruiting and the pitch. Like it is going to fall on these teams to be able to sell someone on their project, on their layout, on the atmosphere, the training, all those things going forward. It goes to this question from Up the Loons, who says, why won't the NWSL CBA's rule that players have to approve a trade just lead to shorter contracts for players? It seems the club would see their inability to have full control in moving a player if things change / don't work out as a liability, and would want to keep contracts nimble to ensure they don't, quote, get stuck with a player who doesn't want to move. Says in parentheses, obviously these are athletes and they're going to want to be somewhere they're playing and have a good relationship, but I can't think of a lot of legal agreements that are based on that would be super uncool to move. I have an obvious answer. Do you want to go first?
I think it's twofold, right? Like if you have a player that you want to invest in and you know that they are want to be there for multi years, I think we're seeing that right now with, I can think off the top of my head, two players in Houston who have signed multi-year. Olivieri and Nielsen just recently re-signed for multi-years. I think that there is, okay, we want to build our squad around these players. I think we will potentially see more like shorter contracts, year contracts even, because after that year, you just become a free agent again. There's no obligation for a club or player. And maybe that's when players are moving and saying, I don't know if this is going to be a good fit, but I want to give it a try. The thing that is interesting about the new rules is the guaranteed contracts. So if you do sign a 4-year deal, I don't know how this actually works. And I am somebody who got injured in in WPS. I got injured and it affected everything else that I had beyond that. So say if somebody gets injured in their second year, are you paying 4 years guaranteed for this player, even though they're never able to step on the field? I think there should be some kind of compensation there. But I think those are the thoughts that players, coaches, GMs, everybody's going to be thinking of. How can we be able to build a team for long term, but not get into too many multi-year contracts to know that there is some fluidity within building our squad year after year?
I completely understand that. I think the part of the question where I go to, and this is something that I think we're all guilty of in every sport, is like creating these scenarios where it's like, oh, well, everything will be this way, while ignoring the reality of, well, you're going to have to get those players to sign those contracts. And there's free agency. So, yeah, if you're offering everyone a 1-year deal, they're going to go somewhere else. They could go somewhere else where it's offering them less for more guaranteed years. Like that's now all become part of the conversation, the negotiation, and what I just said, which is the recruiting pitch. So you can try and do that. My assumption will be you will be unsuccessful a decent amount of the time. And so there'll be some deals where it's beneficial for both parties to be short term, right? A player coming off an injury thinks that they're going to get a better bump the year after, or they're not quite sure where they want to be, or they're trying to break into the national team, a national team, whatever it is. Like those are all things that can happen. I think you will see the long-term contracts. You mentioned the ones in Houston. We saw Mal Swanson just sign a long-term extension. Will be the core players. Like you will say, I want my spine locked up, and then you're going to move other pieces in and out of that, and players might earn their way into longer contracts after that. But yes, you're not going to sign every player to a 4 and 5 year deal, but you are going to want to be able to guarantee, like Chicago can, that Mal Swanson's going to be there. So we know Julia Grosso fits with her, and we can pitch to Grosso, come play with Mal Swanson. Like those are the things that the teams are going to have to figure out. I think it's an interesting question. I don't think 100% anything will happen in any direction, because we're talking about individuals where some will want security,
Right.
some will want flexibility from players' point of view and from clubs' point of view. And I think you're going to see change and variance in all of that going forward. In talking about the international window and the other clubs around the world and everything going on, FIFA put out an official report coming from the most recent transfer window, which closed. They call it the mid-year transfer window, detailing as much as they can, which I think we are in some level of gray space, all of the transfers that occurred around the world and the trends that are going on. NWSL and the US, which I'm pretty sure all of this money is NWSL. Maybe there's some Super League money in here, but at a very low level. NWSL in total spent $1.14 million over the course of the mid-year transfer window alone. It is a 287.9% increase from last year in the same window. It was 128 total moves, with 37 outgoing and 128, coming in. And it was the third highest spending league in the world for this window. England was by far the most, almost a million more than NWSL. Spain was just ahead of NWSL. And then there's almost $1 million gap in spending to fourth, which is Italy, Germany, and France, all kind of close together. The increase, the 287%, is the fourth most in the world. I don't know that the other ones on this list even really had transfers. So we're talking about India, Morocco, Brazil, and Wales. So I don't know what that means totally. But like, this goes to the conversation that we've been having of the Olympics was a big boon for NWSL. Tori came on the show and talked about the failure at the World Cup last year and sort of the need that NWSL approached the NWSLPA to say things aren't going in the right direction. How do we change things, or how do we fix things? And I think this is a sign of the intent that we have seen, where these are high-level, big-time signings coming into NWSL and competing for players with the biggest clubs in the world.
It was an eye-opener, the World Cup in 2023, how much talent is in the world right now. And I think that leads to that conversation that you just said. I think it leads to the increase in international spots that we saw this year from 5 to 7. And then you add 2 more teams, new teams into that. So we brought in a plethora of new international players. And I think in order for NWSL to continue to be a top league or be the best league in the world, which I know they want to do and be claimed, like have that claim, you're going to have more of these players. You're going to have to spend money. And I think it's a good sign that we're seeing that play out, that we are seeing a player from Morocco playing with the Chicago Red Stars now, Ludmila choosing NWSL because the Brazilians are having really good success here. Things like that we're now seeing players choose NWSL because of some of these changes that have happened. Probably a lot to do with the CBA as well. That is really, I think those numbers put it into a good, like, you can grasp those a little bit better and say, all right, NWSL is in a good space. Can we catch up with England and Spain? Spain seems like it's right there. So, and the parity in those leagues is much less. So if you can continue to spend a little bit more to bring the players that you want into this league is going to quickly become easily the best league in the world.
And of course, the league added 2 clubs as well as 2 international spots per club. So that changed some of this, but there's no guarantee when you do that those teams are going to spend money or that they're going to use those international spots, because you don't have to. And so I think it's positive to see, especially took Utah a little bit longer maybe than we'd like, for all of the clubs to be pushing. And I think the expectation is that Boston comes in at a high level as well, and whoever else it is alongside them, to only increase this and add to this. Because remember, this is a total spend. England and Spain have more clubs than NWSL. So if you take this number and you say you're expanded to 20 teams in the future, and that's not immediate, this number could go up and is probably competitive with England. The other thing to remember, which is actually fascinating to me, is that this is the off season for UEFA clubs. So this is like we're building our roster for the season, where this is mid-season for NWSL, and yet NWSL spent less and made less moves in comparison in January than these other clubs did, which I'm very curious about. My
Well, that
assumption
tells
is
me the international. That to me says people don't want to leave
right,
mid-season. They want to leave when they have a fresh start
right.
after their season's over. So that hints a little bit more too at the international schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I do wonder if some of it is like when moves are actually stated because NWSL's window is open longer than these other leagues. So like maybe players were
True.
moving in
Yeah. Yeah.
February and March and didn't get announced properly or whatever.
Yeah.
But in
And I'm
general,
not saying
I
that's
think
happening. I just feel like a lot of these things, these signs to me, the
yeah,
speak in the CBA and the announcement there, the number of signings you're getting in this window compared to the other window, just just tell me that there's something to look at there.
yeah, it'll be really interesting going forward. It has been a really interesting season so far. We are not even into like the full on playoff race, but we are getting
Kind
close.
of.
And let's talk about it. Let's dig
Okay.
into it. So I pulled this NWSL form table tweet from Chris Henderson at Woso Soccer on Twitter, who covers college soccer better than anyone. And as well, there's some NWSL coverage in there. It was the NWSL form table for points in the last 5 matches, which is a tough scale right now because you're talking about 2 games post Summer Cup and 3 games pre Summer Cup. But it brought together the teams that I think are in the same conversations that I wanted to bring up here. So it worked out perfectly for me. So therefore, I chose to use it because that's what we do. Let's start with the teams that are on the bubble or trying to move up, who you feel is for real, who you are buying, and
Yeah.
who you are less sold by, and who you are selling.
Should we tell
So
people what the form table looks like
I'm
right now?
about I'm about
You're
to do
about
it.
to. Oh gosh, I thought you were
Nailed
going
it.
straight into it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So first place is not shockingly Orlando. They've picked up 15 points in their last 5 matches,
That's
which is
perfect.
all of the available points in that span. Second is North Carolina on 12 points. Third is Washington Spirit on 10 points. And then fourth is a tie between Seattle and Bay FC on 9 points. Behind that is Utah Royals on 8, and then Gotham sits on 7, and then you go down the rest of it. All the teams we're going to talk about are in that top half, so I'm going to stop there because I think everyone has a limit to how many numbers they can hear me count. And don't worry, I'm going to start reading schedules off soon, so we'll get there. So Utah sitting right now, as I said, 8 points in their last 5 matches, just behind Seattle and Bay on 9 points. Those are the 3 teams I want to key on. Utah, 3-1 win over Houston this weekend. Seattle, 3-2 come from behind victory at Louisville this weekend. And then Bay FC, after losing to Utah last week, go on the road and smoke the Portland Thorns in Portland 3-1. They led 2-0 in 18 minutes. Were never equalized in this game. And then they get the 3-1 victory to steady themselves right on the edge of the playoff line. 3 huge results, 3 really fun matches over the course of this weekend. Which one are you sold on the most? Which one are you buying the most? Sorry. Where would you put your
Yeah.
money here? Which one, from a performance point of view right now, do you feel the best about?
I'm buying Utah.
I knew you were going to buy Utah. I even put them at the top, even though they're the lowest in the standings.
Because you watched the game on Friday and you heard me say I think this Utah team now their path to the playoffs is difficult, like with the number of points that they have to have, but I think they're gonna push, and I don't think a lot of teams in NWSL right now want to play Utah because they have found some consistency. I've been very adamant all year that they have built themselves on some really good defensive principles. And even when they were losing games, they
Yeah.
weren't losing by a lot under Amy Rodriguez. And with the change at head coach and bringing in Kunratz as an interim, he has instilled a couple of different principles that I think have done really well. They're now playing out of a double pivot. There's a little bit more fluidity in how the front 5 work, but they've still been good defensively. So I like Utah. They probably have one of the best summer transfers out of anybody. They bring in Chloe Lacasse, who is I'm going to get after you winger. Like she wants to dribble at you. They bring in Mina Tanaka, who is intellectually top notch, understands how to break teams down, tactics, can play in really any of those front four positions for them. And then they bring in Zornoza, who is a Spanish international, won the World Cup, played for Real Madrid for years and years and years. And they have her playing next to Anna Tejada, who is a center back, now playing as a defensive midfielder. So you can be a little bit more aggressive in sending your outside backs and sending numbers forward because in all reality, you have three center backs trying to stop the play from progressing in the opposite direction. I like Utah. They are starting to click. Their front players are all scoring goals. I'm buying what Utah is cooking up.
I feel very strongly about this too.
Okay.
I am still this weekend I will learn more.
Okay. Yeah.
Houston on the road and Bay at home is not the pure test for this group, but the fixes to some of the problems that existed, mainly the attack and the goal scoring, feels real. I'm curious to watch the defending against Kansas City this weekend.
Yeah.
Because Houston did get behind the back line when it was direct balls, especially from wide areas, then into central areas, but from deep, not crosses. And that's where you saw Mandy Hott getting a little trouble on the goal conceded and a few opportunities where there was some duels and 50-50s that goalkeeper had to make or center back recovering. Del Fava was good once again, but had to be.
Yeah.
Shawinga is a different test in moments like that than anyone else in
is.
NWSL. Let me ask you this one because I feel the love for Tanaka. I get it. I'm there. Ali Sentnor obviously not available right now because she's with the U20s who lost to Spain, by the way. They'll play Morocco tonight, so we're not going to talk about it because by the time that game happens, our show will then be useless, so we're not going to do that. But Tanaka started as the quote-unquote 10 in this game because Sentnor is not there. Slid out wide late on to finish it off. I kind of expected her to be the 9 with the best group in here. Where would you put her in this Utah side when everyone's available?
I think I would put her out wide because the way that they play with Griffiths as the right back, they want her to be uber aggressive and getting forward. And she has the pace and she has the fitness to be able to do that. So I think with Tanaka as the right winger, she can tuck inside and be a dual 10, which you didn't see as much with Chloe Lacasse as a winger because she's a little bit more of a traditional winger. She'll come inside, but she can't break through a back line in that second 10 spot the way that Tanaka can. And then that gives you Sentnor in a spot where over Summer Cup and the first game coming back, you really saw her excel. I think this is her spot. This is where she should be playing, especially with this Utah team. So it puts them both in a place where they're playing right behind the midfield line, in front of the back line, and then they have players to be able to dish and distribute to combine at the top of the box. I think originally I had her, I said she would play in the 9 or the 10, Tanaka. But I do think Betfort is right there. She's the only player. She has over 4 expected goals on the year and has not scored a goal. To me, it just feels like she gets one in NWSL and it's going to be different. And I think with those 2 players playing right behind her or in front of her, whichever way you want to look at it, there's only going to be once, it's going to come eventually, that goal.
Okay. Because that's sort of I assume the battle there is between Moynihan and Betfort being on the field, right? I assume in this scenario you'd throw Chloe Lacasse on the left?
Lacasse has been playing on the right. Monahan's been playing on the left.
But you were saying play Tanaka on the right.
Yeah. So I think Lacasse would be, right now, a player that comes off the bench.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I think that would be really impactful for her with how quick she is over 10 yards. That is a defender's nightmare coming in at the 75th minute.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And you also she's sort of working her way into the team. She wasn't a full-time starter for Arsenal either. So it's going to take some time there. I can accept that. I would say with the way Sentnor is kind of a 9 at times and Tanaka feels very comfortable in the areas you just talked about, I would like to see that interchange. I wonder if you lose an outlet because you don't have one player permanently high.
Yeah.
it would be more
Getting
like what
center
we
backs back.
saw KC do at times, where Bia was floating out, or Dabinia now isn't really a true nine, and you have some of the movement there, but KC is struggling, so maybe that is an example of what not to do. I think it would be fascinating though to see that, because I thought with obviously when Sentinor comes back, there's way less responsibility on her shoulders because there's more talent on the team. There's
Yeah.
more help. You talked about on the broadcast, I thought really interestingly, of like not just talent but experience,
Yeah.
like older players and players who have been there before, not in NWSL but in the game, and like Ali Center doesn't have to step on the field and feel like if it's not me, no one's doing it.
Yeah.
And we'll have a midfield partner in Zornosa who is must watch
She's so
for a
good.
deep lying midfielder, is like must watch.
Lefty,
The outlet
like,
pass on
yeah.
the third goal. Yeah. This is everything you want in this league.
Nice. Well, how about those three teams for you? Or if you're buying someone, who are you buying?
So I like Utah. I like watching them play. I would probably pick to watch them play over all of them. I have been impressed by Seattle
Okay.
over the
Tell me
course of
more.
this week.
Tell me more.
It is not straightforward, and I think I still have to see everyone healthy. It really, as much as it hurts Utah to lose Sentinor, I think Bugs is a huge loss for Seattle with the way she performed in that first game. The athleticism you have there, the ability to chase over the top and close space in front of you. But I watched a Seattle team that battled through moments that they haven't battled through this year, of like pure belief that they should win games and that the expectations are higher. You saw the emotion from Laura Harvey last week. You have a game this week in which you're playing on the road against Louisville. There's roughly a 2-hour rain delay going into the game. So your game time gets pushed back 2 hours. You concede twice from corner kicks in the first half, and you come back and get a win. And you have a player now, because you have flexibility, you have Mondesir and G come off the bench. And I thought they were the two most dangerous players on the field for the most part in this game, especially for Seattle. And they both came in late to run at tired defenders and help sort of, you could see G had read the game and came in and was like, this is where the gaps
it.
are. I'm going to live in this little right-hand space, and I'm going to continue to get balls into my feet and pull the back line apart. So I think a lot of this stuff is real for Seattle in terms of the fight for this. Also, I did a schedule read, and they have the easiest schedule of the three teams.
Okay. Well, that helps, right?
In their last 8 games, they play 5 non-playoff teams. They play Houston twice, which isn't bad, and they play Angel City twice, which gets them into a playoff conversation if that's who they're chasing. They also play Utah, is the other team that's outside the postseason that they face off against, but they finished the last game of the season against Orlando, which is tasty and fascinating. So
Yeah.
I like a lot of this team. Oh, and I didn't even mention Howell, by the way. I thought Howell was great against Louisville. You
Yeah.
saw her at her best. And that's the other piece of this, is ground coverage and 50-50 tackling in midfield. That wasn't there. That allowed Fishlock to create a little bit and be a little bit freer. All the things you talked about for Utah, of like, we have the defensive core so you can take risks in the attacking third. That feels realer now for Seattle than it did.
Yeah. I see what you're saying about Seattle, and I like Serna Gorsevic. I don't think we've seen her do really everything that she can do, but man, she does not miss on a cross. Her crosses are dimes, just landing right on the head of Heidema. So if Jordan Heidema doesn't score a lot of goals through the end of this season, I'm going to be disappointed in that, because I know the service is going to be there, especially from that right side. The thing that I thought is interesting about Seattle right now is they're building differently. They're bringing Quinn between or on the outside of the center back, so that's allowing now both outside backs to get high. They've chosen Shea Holmes to play as an outside back, utilizing her left foot, which she is a left-footed player. So I think that that's an interesting shift. I think Quinn lacks in the distribution that you could see in those moments from a Jess Fishlock. So I wonder if they maybe go Hal Fishlock and then G as the 10. That would be, to me, more convincing about what Seattle is going to do as a more dominant threat forward. And I think if you do that, then you can start a player like Mondesir from the start, because you have better distribution going forward. Quinn lateral passes, I think, has that down. A lot of the moments where Louisville came in transition back at Seattle's back line was just a misplayed pass forward from Quinn that's picked off. I think just a little too televised. I'm going to go here. So I would like it. Fishlock, you have the grit of Fishlock, but also distribution, the grit of Hal sitting, and then you have G who can just do whatever G wants because that's G. So I get what you're saying. I'm not as sold. I'm not as sold.
I think that's fair. I think I watched the game against Louisville thinking that they played the group because it was a tough road game. And like the group you're talking about is the one I expect to see.
Yeah.
And so I watched them go on the road and get a win at Louisville thinking there's another step to come from
that's
this
a good
side.
point. Okay.
And so that's where it's like, it makes
The
sense
block
to me.
is built and they're just
Yeah.
about to put the next one up.
And Mondesir, like, clearly is not ready to play 90 minutes. And so
Yeah.
they're not taking that risk. And we've seen different teams try and handle this in different ways of new players and players coming out of preseason and all of that. But you see a individual threat in Mondesir that didn't exist on this team and doesn't really exist when she's not on the field. So it feels like there's more steps for this group. And I think they should be pretty excited about what's going on. Neither of us bought Bay FC. So I assume we are selling Bay FC. Oh, by the way, reminder, Seattle made one trade just now. Hannah Glass brought in from Kansas City, another left back option. We'll see what happens there. It reminded me because Bay FC just made a trade. Penelope Hawking brought in from Chicago Red Stars as a center forward option for this group. Bay didn't need the help up top. They got the 3-1 win, as we said, against Portland, which is a massive victory for this team. A really strong result. Abby Dahlkemper, the opening goal on her debut for her hometown club. There were some pretty strong vibes in the opening 20 minutes of this game.
Yeah, it was full force. Bay were saying, all right, we're going to go back to what we did at the beginning of the year, which is press higher up the field, be a little bit not looser with our defensive, but more focused on how we attack as opposed to how we defend. And I think that was the big pivot in the middle of the season for Bay when they were scoring a lot of goals to when they weren't. And it felt like they had gone back to what they were doing at the beginning of the year. I think this Hawking trade is really intriguing because I think about Penelope Hawking and her ability to drive with the ball between lines, but then how do you mix that in with Tess Bodie, with Kundananji, with Asisa Ushwala, who we just haven't seen the best of Asisa yet. So I don't know where Penelope Hawking will play. Will she play as a 10? Will she play as a winger coming inside and playing next to Tess Bodie at times? I don't know. It feels like an interesting move that I look forward to hopefully seeing this weekend against Racing.
It is a big game for this Bay team against Racing because if they're going to be in this playoff race, they're going to have to get a result there.
Yes.
I mentioned
It's
Utah.
like a 6-pointer.
Utah are going to Kansas City. That is like a whole different test in its own realm, and that's going to be a huge game. And Seattle are going to Angel City, which is a 6-pointer as well, and a massive game for this Seattle team. Angel City trying to keep the results up as we get through to the second half of the season. So that's the buy and sell below the playoff line. Let's jump above the playoff line because I mentioned that form table, and second place was North Carolina with 12, and third place was Washington Spirit with 10. Washington, of course, getting the big victory over Kansas City last week. That moved them to second in the standings. North Carolina got the big victory this week against Kansas City. That
Which
moved
we
them.
should say, 3 losses in a row for Kansas City.
We're going to say it in a moment because we've got it.
Ooh.
As our next segment is what's the worry mark?
The worries. I'm too far ahead.
You're excited and I appreciate it. So of these two teams, North Carolina and Washington, who would you buy? Who would you sell based off the performances you've seen so far?
Ooh, this one's hard because I've always liked the way North Carolina plays. I think it is replicable. It's understandable. I think players on the field understand what spaces need to be occupied at what moment in order to be successful going forward. And it feels like over the last few months, Sean Nahas has simplified it by actually not even bringing in an outside back to shift centrally. They're really just starting out of a 3-back and playing up that way with Denny Weatherholt, just starting as a makeshift outside back, but really a central midfielder. So I like North Carolina. I've always liked them. I think I would buy if I knew when Caroline was
Yeah.
going to be on the field. And I think that's the biggest thing right now that sets me to go for Washington is Caroline's status, because everybody knows that this team is going to have a different dynamic to them when Caroline's back on the field. They're not only just going to be able to possess, but they're going to be able to pull you out into a high press and then let Caroline go into the space behind the back line of opponents in a quick breakout. And I think that that's what they don't really have right now to the effect that they will with Caroline. So I'm going to buy Washington. I like what they have built. I think in our earlier episode I expressed I think their center back still I want there to be an upped level there to not give away silly goals, but when you're looking at them going forward now with Kouassi, Ule Sar is constantly in the right place to put the ball away. Does she always put the ball away? Not always. I think she could have a few more goals. And then Trinity Rodman, they looked a little different without Corey Bethune. So you wonder if that's just a little bit of rest post Olympics and not a cross country trip from her. But this Washington team can sit very comfortably and defend and say, come through us. And if you can't break through us with good possession, we're going to pick a ball off and score a goal in transition. They can also build and beat you through really good passing and movements and overloads in the channels. They got a lot going on, and I'm buying Washington. I like where they're at right now.
So Washington, the 1-1 draw in the last game against San Diego. They had 1.6 XG in that game and only scored the one goal. On the flip side, San Diego 0.5. They end in a 1-1 draw. It then spurred the conversation of, is this team a finishing team or not? If you don't follow expected own goals on Twitter, you should. At X own goals, it's the account that's doing all the NWSL work out of American Soccer Analysis. The account put out that Washington's 2024 goal conversion rate of 13% sits tied for 7th out of 112 NWSL team seasons since the league began. On top of that, if you look solely at minutes played with an even score line, when both teams are theoretically trying to score, basically not garbage time, Washington's conversion rate is tied for best out of 86 NWSL team seasons since 2016. It is one of those moments where you're like, no, I get you, but I watched the game, and that's not what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And Douglas Reyes Cerrone in the chat right now says the maddening Olisar experience. Yeah, I get it. I hear it from Washington fans. I watch the games, and you're like, yeah, they could be up 3-0. But at the same time, they are second in the league. The numbers are saying that they are finishing their opportunities, and they are creating a ton of opportunities. Yeah. I think that's part of, you have to accept this is who we are. This is what we do. This is how we create chances. I think, to me, Sar unquestionably in this group is a factor. Their ability to press with her at the point, their ability to counter press with her in this team, their ability on transition is because of the fluidity of the front three or four, whoever's in the group. Lacey Santos at the crossbar in this game early on as well. And that's all without Corey Bethune, as you mentioned. So I agree with you on Washington. For North Carolina's sake, as you said, Caroline is going to be a huge part of that. She played in the Olympics, so the assumption is she will be available at some point. There was 2 big plays in their game this week where Courtney Vine got to the end line, pulled it back, and no one was inside the 18, not just the 6. That's where you would like to see your MVP. But then Courtney Vine sets up herself and scores a goal that they didn't have her before the summer. So the team is better, I think, than they were going into the break. I think they are improved. I think these numbers are for real, even with the loss to Seattle last week. But I think Washington has taken a bigger step so far. And North Carolina, as you said, still has to get there going forward. But you want to go and worries. So let's get there for you. Kansas City has lost back-to-back games to Washington and North Carolina. As I just said, Shawinga scored against North Carolina, so she has scored now in 7 straight, has continued to stay hot. Bia, obviously, an injury absence. Claire Hutton now out with the U20s as a part of that group. Where are you on this panic meter? How worried are you about Kansas City? Because you had me draft them, so I am pretty unhappy right now.
I forced you into that draft
Yeah.
pick. It'll be interesting how they perform at home because those 2 losses both came on the road, and it has been hard for teams to come into CPKC Stadium and threaten. Not to say that I shouldn't say threaten because other teams have scored a number of goals there, but to be able to perform in the atmosphere that
The
is,
momentum of the games at home is the way Kansas City wants the tempo, and no one outside of Orlando for one half has been able to throw that off.
They do. And so I think teams have not given them what they want. Like if you want to go quickly in transition, well, we're going to sit in a little bit more in this mid block and not give you the space to play in over the back, right? We're going to slow the tempo of the game down. And if Kansas City's not controlling the tempo of the game, I think they have struggled. It was pretty direct when they were successful, right? It is quickly through the midfield, using the speed on both channels at times, but also the target play of Bia. And not to say that they've had Bia a lot this year, but I think that this team is just like I talked about Caroline. They bring an X factor when they have Bia as the 9 because you can threaten and create more space with runs going in beyond, but then soften up the back line with Bia coming off to create that space for the other players. So without her, they have opted for Dabinia to play in that spot, and it's not the spot for Dabinia for me. She's a 10. She wants to float. She doesn't want to stay in central space all the time, and it has felt like they're trying to plug and play all these pieces that don't really. I don't know how well they fit. Does Dabinia fit in the 9? Is Alana Cook that much better in the back line than Elizabeth Ball? Those are the questions that I feel like, and I don't know what's going on in Kansas City, but it feels to me like there's a little disbelief in the decisions that are making, and it feels like it's rattled them a little bit.
Yeah. I agree with you. I've been confused by the amount of moves. I've been confused by the amount of ins and outs in the same position. Like, you were the second best team in the league going into the break. You've chosen to swap your own roster out for pieces. Now, the center back spot, we've had this debate a little bit about Alana Cook. I understand with the injuries you've had of trying to stockpile in there, but then you let Lauren go. So, like, they have made some interesting moves in some spots, and it's almost like it happened faster than they expected, right? Vlatko comes in, you have a new or you lost your GM, and then it's like these were the planned summer moves, and they made them anyway.
I do think, why am I blanking on her name from South Africa right now? Magala?
Yes.
Magala?
They added 2 players,
Yeah, I think if she gets time on the front line was most effective when they were pacey. Like, I think that is the number one attribute when you had Cooper, Bia, and Shawinga. They all had really good pace to be able to shift a back line and pull them apart and move them in various directions. I just don't think Dabinia has that to her game anymore. And so she's always striving to stretch, but then gets caught up with and the ball gets taken away from her and she can't make the correct pass that she needs to. So Magala, I think if you can play her on the wing and play Shawinga as the 9, it just brings you back up to that, like, let's make our strength, which is going in transition, and maybe they can have a little bit more success there.
It was interesting. I went back and looked through a couple of the performances in the first half of the year that were similar to the Washington and North Carolina games. Like, they went and beat Portland 4-1 early on in the year. and you look at the underlying numbers and they are similar. Like they are still direct. They complete a similar amount of passes. They have
Yeah.
a similar amount of touches in the box. I think the speed part makes sense of like if you have the way they threaten teams, you I think caused a little bit more chaos. You created some more mistakes early on, and now you've lost that half step maybe, and you're not as close on the counter press, or you're not there to get to that first ball and beat a defender and create chaos along the back line. I think some of that makes a ton of sense. DiBernardo was also playing out wide early on and just I think giving you a ton of energy. That's another option, which could drop Debinha into a more comfortable spot centrally. It's hard without Hutton in there
Yeah, I was gonna
to be
say
able to
that's
have
the-
enough cover centrally for Debinha in that spot. But I think those are some of the options. It will be fascinating to see what happens this weekend when they come home.
I think it
Because
is.
yeah,
It's a big weekend for them to
like
be able to be at home, say, okay, forget what's happened. Let's restart it right now. Because I think that they too can be they can change it within a second and they could be back on a streak and we don't see them lose.
yeah, and they were good in Summer Cup. So like they since the loss to Orlando had strong performances. They beat North Carolina at home with two very similar groups to what we saw this weekend. So I think the opportunity is out there for this Kansas City team, but I think the worries should be real. I don't think the worries long term should be real. I think the core of this team is good. I think there's an understanding of
Yeah.
what that core is, but it does feel like it was a very odd summer for them. And as Orlando has gone from strength to strength, Kansas City is now finding themselves after a momentum run. It feels like early on, which I didn't think we'd be saying at this point of the season. Blue Penguin has a question in the mailbag says, can anyone beat the Pride? Clearly not at the moment, but do you think there are any teams that stack up well against them that have the best shot? If I said to you, Orlando Pride are in the NWSL Cup final in Kansas City, and you have to select the opponent to beat them, who are you leaning on right now?
Okay, so not throughout the rest of I was just gonna pull up the schedule to see
No,
who
no.
they have the rest of the season. Who am I picking to beat the Pride in the final? That is a good question.
And I think we'll say reasonably healthy. So like maybe not guaranteed perfect health for both teams,
Yeah.
but like my thought process, well, I'll tell you the team
Yeah,
that I'm
you-
thinking of, but
Okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, you go
Oh,
first.
at the end?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of which team. You know, I probably would go with Washington.
Yeah.
I just I think that they have not just a good 11, they have some good depth, and it's a team that you just like you said they were pretty good in the 0-0 0-0, like
Yeah.
the best, right?
Yeah.
I feel like they could handle the game at the beginning, played Banda pretty well, in which it feels like a lot of teams have done a good job of managing Banda as
Yeah.
of late. With that being said,
She still scores.
she still scores.
Yeah.
But I think I would choose Washington because overall, I just think that I trust Heraldez and Gonzalez and what they've built there and their game plan, but also the players that they have, I think would create the most threats in attack for Orlando to be able to manage.
I think I agree with you because I think Orlando has shown flexibility. They are not a dominant possession team, but they have shown that they can mix and match in games.
Yeah,
Washington, I think, is similar.
I think so.
I think
too.
if Orlando came out and took the game, Washington could say, all right, let's play direct for now and get out of trouble. And then we've got our front 3 or 4 that can go and get after you. Or if you come out and sit in a little and say, build through us, I think there's enough confidence in this Washington central midfield. I love the change at right back right now to like add a little bit more ball playing. Esme Morgan could come into this group as well, but not necessary. And I think there's confidence and belief that they can build through most teams because they have the threat over the top.
Yeah.
It opens up a little bit more space for them to play with. The other one I was thinking, even off this weekend, was Gotham.
I knew you were going to say Gotham because I think it's
because
the smartest of the choices.
they are the we can win and not play our best, which is what I think it would take to beat Orlando in a one game final, is like
Yeah.
survival and then a match winning moment. And I would say if Gotham is reasonably healthy, as I said, so not 100%, because you've got like 18 options of players who are out and in this group, but reasonably healthy, I think you're looking at a team that has a lot of players on the back line who are going to win big battles, step up in big moments. You've obviously have Berger, who's a match winner, and then you've got the threat in the attack, whether it's from wide or from central. So those would be the two that stand out right now. And I think both of them are flexible teams because Orlando is a flexible team. Where I think if we had this convo pre-Summer Cup about KC, you were talking more tactically, like which team matches up well against what KC does well, where Orlando is a bit more of this amoeba that adjusts to the games as they happen.
Yeah. I just thought like how crazy like this could really happen. We could see a team go undefeated the whole
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. It would be wild if it happened. And maybe I'll get someone to crunch the numbers of like what the odds are and what it looks like and how it happens.
It's above
But
our pay grade, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's above our pay grade on the math side. Also, they're not doing it against easy teams.
No.
Like it was Gotham this
Yeah.
weekend.
And Gotham looked like they were a different like on a
Yeah.
different level than Orlando.
Yeah. Kansas City in 2 weeks, Friday, September 13th. That is the rematch. It's not going to be probably touted the way we thought it would coming out of the last matchup and coming out of the first half of the year, but it could be a big moment in this season.
I did see today Bia is healthy and training with the team.
Fingers crossed, that would be huge. We have a question or a comment in the chat from John Rollins who says Banda for Ballon d'Or, which takes us into our fourth topic. How perfect is that? The Ballon d'Or feminile finalists have been named. The award is given out on October 28th. There is a huge list of names on here. There's a lot of NWSL representation in this group. There's a large amount of U.S. women's national team representation in this group as well. Barbara Banda is one of the ones that is named in this. Not super shocking with the numbers she has put up, both in China and then now in NWSL immediately upon arriving. Bonmati obviously is at the top of this list, won it last year, won the Champions League with Barcelona once again, had an okay Olympics with Spain, I guess a frustrating one for them. Tarsiane is on this list, which is a little surprising. Trinity Rodman is on this list, as I think expected. Mal Swanson returns to this list, of course, after having to sit out a year. Lindsay Horan is on this list, which I think many people would have expected. Sophia Smith as well. So the triple espresso, going to Paris, going to France, maybe for this award.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's these awards are tough for me. I did a rant yesterday about Defensive Player of the Year for MLS of like, not everyone watches, not everyone knows what's going on, not everyone has a scale. They just vote. I can almost guarantee Bonmati is going to win this thing. But it is exciting to see the NWSL players, like the transfer thing we talked about, be respected in this conversation. And this award, I assume, is for like October to October performance or September to September performance. So in saying that, like most of this is this NWSL season is what it is reliant on, which is tough for NWSL players because you don't really have a postseason in there. You don't have a ton of trophies to sort of lean off of. But it clearly has gone to the players who have exploded out of the goal scoring gates, except for and Shawinga is not on here. I believe Shawinga's sister is on here.
Yes, her sister is.
Yes.
I think the triple espresso all have like a good shot of being named to as the Ballon d'Or. One, they've all had really good seasons leading into Olympics where they all had really good Olympics. So I think that that's going to be front of mind for a lot of people. I think you think of Banda's performance in the Olympics as well with the hat tricks. You're going to think, okay, maybe she'll be up there. But there's some really interesting names on here. Gavin from Germany, I thought was one of the best players for Germany at the Olympics, plays for Bayern Munich. I also feel like Caldente played Barcelona, was a Spain World Cup champion. Again, that shouldn't be a part of it, winning the World Cup in 23, but winning the Champions League for Barcelona, winning league for them. I think Caldente is playing in the Olympics. She's an incredible player that I think rightfully so will probably be on the top, more towards the top of that list. But with after winning the Olympics, I would be really surprised if this isn't a U.S. women's national team player.
The tough part is, which one do you choose?
Yeah.
And they're all going to take votes from each other, and they're not going to take votes from each other just because they all start and
That's true.
you know they're friends. Like
That's really
true. They're going to take votes from each other because they each deserve it in different ways, right? Trinity Rodman, the winner against Japan, the moment she had,
she played the most, I think, of any forward.
Yes, and I think played the most consistent over the course of it. But Sophia Smith, I think, was the linchpin of a lot of it, and probably over the 12 months had the best NWSL play because Mel Swanson was injured and Trinity Rodman had less success last season before coming back into this season. And then Mel Swanson scores the winner in the gold medal match and has some of the biggest moments and has had an incredible tear to start the year in NWSL play. It makes it really, really tough. I think Lauren James is one of the names that's going to get pushed in there, and mentioned Bunny Shaw probably as well, who I believe won Player of the Year in England for the season and will probably be a finalist in this. Putellas as well, of course, because as you mentioned, the Champions League victory for Barcelona. So it'll be interesting to watch. Alyssa Nair, by the way, also on this list. So another piece of that Olympic winning team.
I hope she wins it.
How ridiculous would that be? Everyone's like, who are we going to vote for in the attack? Honestly, how is Naomi Gurman not on this list,
I know,
by the way?
That's wild.
That actually is wild, especially with the year San Diego had coming out of last season and the way she has played. That is a miss, and that is a mistake. So now we've got something to complain about, which is great.
But it kind of proves what you were saying earlier is like people don't really watch, so they don't know. This is mostly like players that score goals.
Yeah. And scoring goals is boring. That's what we say about soccer. All right. Well, that's it for us. We are excited for another weekend of NWSL coverage. I'll be back on Monday with the recap show to talk you through what happened on the weekend. We'll be back, of course, on Wednesday live to talk all things NWSL as we continue on this stretch. As we both mentioned a lot, we're going to learn a lot this weekend. There are some big matches for some teams that are sitting right on the edge of things. So a lot to watch for. Jump into the Discord, subscribe to the Patreon if you haven't. Thank you so much to you, Jordan, for being here. Thank you to all of you for listening, and we'll talk to you again very, very soon.